The murders of Kenneth Griffin and Mark Dribbin represent one of Portland's most disturbing cold cases, spanning 2 decades and revealing a killer who may have claimed even more victims. This is a story of investigative persistence, forensic genealogy breakthrough, and the grim discovery that connected 2 seemingly unrelated deaths 21 years apart. Mark Dribbin was 42 years old in the summer of 1999. He worked as an airline cargo handler for United Airlines at Portland International Airport. Neighbors described him as a friendly, responsible man who lived alone in North Portland. He was close to his family in Los Angeles and maintained regular contact. His work record was spotless. On July 2, 1999, Dribbin called his supervisor requesting the night off for a personal emergency. This was unusual. No one saw or heard from him again. When he failed to show up for work, a friend reported him missing on July 6th. Police went to his residence that day. What they found suggested something terrible had occurred. Inside Dribbin's home, investigators discovered substantial forensic evidence of violence. Blood spatter covered the walls. The scene indicated that someone had attempted to clean up after a violent act. Numerous items were missing from the house, including Dribbin's black 1995 Ford Explorer Sport. Nearly 2 weeks later, on July 18th, police found his vehicle abandoned in southeast Portland, in an area Dribbin did not usually frequent. Forensic teams processed both his car and home. They recovered DNA evidence from an unknown suspect, but the profile matched no one in any database. On August 11, 2000, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office issued a presumptive death certificate for Mark Dribbin. Without a body or a suspect, the case went cold. His family offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. They held on to hope for answers, but years passed with no developments. Mark Dribbin's body has never been found. 20 years later, advances in forensic science cracked the case open. In March 2019, the Portland Police Bureau's Cold Case Homicide Detail reopened the investigation. They submitted the unknown suspect's DNA for forensic genetic genealogy analysis to a private company. The analysis compared DNA evidence against ancestral records in public genealogy databases. Months later, the genealogy investigation identified a potential suspect among several brothers in a specific family. The trail led detectives to Christopher Lovrian, a 53-year-old metal fabricator in southeast Portland. On November 18, 2019, detectives interviewed Lovrian about Dribbin's death. On April 16, 2020, police obtained Lovrian's DNA. The results matched the DNA from Dribbin's home and vehicle 21 years earlier. Until the genetic genealogy analysis pointed investigators towards Lovrian, he had never been on their radar. On August 30, 2020, a Multnomah County grand jury indicted Christopher Lovrian for the murder of Mark Dribbin. An arrest warrant was issued. 4 days later, on May 4th, police arrested Lovrian at his southeast Portland home. But the investigation was about to take an even darker turn. Just 3 months before Lovrian's arrest, another man had gone missing. Kenneth Griffin, age 56, was last seen alive on February 1, 2020. He was reported missing the following day. Griffin had experienced homelessness but was living with roommates at the time he disappeared. Chief Deputy District Attorney Kirsten Snowden later clarified that while Griffin didn't have long-term stable housing, he was not homeless when he vanished. There was no indication that Griffin knew anything about the Dribbin murder or that he had any connection to Christopher Lovrian. On August 6, 2020, 2 days after Lovrian's arrest for Dribbin's murder, Portland Police Bureau detectives conducted a search of Lovrian's house in southeast Portland. They found 6 firearms, including 2 9mm pistols, a .40 caliber pistol, a .357 caliber revolver, and 2 .223 caliber rifles. Lovrian was a convicted felon and legally prohibited from possessing any weapons. But the firearms were not the most significant discovery waiting for investigators. On May 19, 2020, detectives executed a second search warrant, this time focusing on a shed on Lovrian's property. Inside, they made a gruesome discovery. Kenneth Griffin's dismembered remains were hidden in the shed. The Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office determined that Griffin's death was a homicide. According to statements Lovrian later made to a grand jury, he waited approximately 3 days after killing Griffin before beginning to dismember the body. Investigators concluded that the two victims were strangers to each other and to Lovrian. These appeared to be random, stranger-related killings. The discovery of Griffin's remains while investigating Dribbin's 21-year-old cold case shocked the community and raised immediate concerns. Evidence found at Lovrian's residence suggested there might be additional victims. Detective McGuire told reporters that they had evidence indicating there could be more victims beyond the two they knew about, though he could not specify how many or from what time period. Authorities issued a specific appeal to the public. They asked anyone with information about missing persons who may have been living under the Interstate 205 bridge in southeast Portland between summer 2019 and May 2020. Lovrian, though not homeless himself, apparently had some connection to that area during that time frame. The reason for the focus on this location and period remained undisclosed. The Multnomah County Grand Jury indicted Lovrian on 2 counts of second-degree murder, 1 count of abuse of a corpse, and 6 counts of being a felon in possession of a firearm. He pled not guilty at his arraignment on March 11, 2021. In January 12, 2024, Lovrian pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter in Dribbin's death. His sentencing was postponed pending resolution of Griffin's murder charges. In April 2024, Lovrian went to trial. On April 15th, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder and first-degree abuse of a corpse in Griffin's death. On Friday, April 26, 2024, Judge Ramras sentenced 57-year-old Christopher Lovrian to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 26 years for Griffin's murder. This sentence would run consecutively to his 20-year sentence for Dribbin's manslaughter conviction. Combined, Lovrian would not be eligible to apply for parole until he had served 46 years in prison. Given that he was 57 years old at sentencing, Lovrian will almost certainly die behind bars. At the sentencing, Kenneth Griffin's family spoke about their long journey to justice. They expressed gratitude that their loved one's memory would live on and that accountability had finally been achieved. Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt acknowledged the detectives and forensic scientists who refused to give up on these cold case homicides, noting that time would never stand in the way of justice. Mark Dribbin's body remains missing to this day. His family continues to live without the closure of recovering their loved one's remains. As for whether Christopher Lovrian committed additional murders, authorities have not brought any further charges, though the investigation remains open. The question of other potential victims continues to haunt this already tragic case. The murders of Mary Jane Malatag and Jeffrey Flores Atup remained unsolved for 37 years until DNA technology and genetic genealogy identified their killer, even though he had been dead for 20 years. On December 19, 1982, 16-year-old Jeffrey Flores Atup worked at the Sarah Theaters in Milpitas, California. His cousin, Mary Jane Malatag, also 16, was at the theater with friends waiting for him. After Jeffrey closed the theater, they walked to a 7-Eleven on North Able Street and purchased food. At 12:35 in the morning on December 20th, they were last seen walking northbound on North Able Street toward Jeffrey's home on Horcajo Street in Milpitas. They never arrived. At 6 o'clock on December 20th morning, police received a call about a body near Green Valley Road and Scott Creek Road in Fremont. Officers found Jeffrey deceased with injuries indicating homicide. The area was rural and undeveloped. At 8:35 that morning, a second call reported a person down near Hunter Lane and Mission Boulevard. Officers found Mary Jane dead with injuries consistent with homicide. The crime scenes were 4 miles apart. Initially, investigators did not know the homicides were related, but they soon learned the victims were cousins together the previous evening. An extensive investigation followed. Multiple interviews were conducted, and persons of interest were investigated. Detectives processed both crime scenes thoroughly and collected DNA evidence, but no arrests were made. The case went cold as leads dried up. In 1999, DNA technology had advanced significantly. Fremont detectives reopened the case and located preserved DNA evidence from the crime scenes. This evidence was uploaded into state and national databases attempting to find a match to a known offender. Unfortunately, there was no match in any database. The DNA profile belonged to an unknown person who had never been arrested or had their DNA entered into the system. The case remained cold. In 2018, Detective Jacob Blass took a renewed look at the case using forensic genetic genealogy, the same technique used to identify the Golden State Killer earlier that year. This revolutionary investigative method compares DNA evidence from crime scenes to public genealogy databases populated by DNA profiles voluntarily submitted by people researching their ancestry. By analyzing these matches, investigators can build family trees and potentially identify suspects through their relatives. Detective Blass submitted the DNA profile to Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia, which specializes in DNA analysis for law enforcement. The lab analyzed the DNA and provided crucial information, including the name of a relative connected to the suspect. This was the breakthrough the case needed. Detective Blass spent over 2 months building a family tree with more than 400 people. He systematically narrowed potential suspects based on geographic location and criminal history. The investigative work gradually pointed to one individual, Clifton Hudspeth. Clifton Hudspeth was 31 in 1982 and lived in Milpitas, relatively close to where the teenagers were last seen. His residence was a 4-minute drive from where Jeffrey's body was discovered. Sources confirmed Hudspeth was in the area of Jacqueline Road on December 19th at the time the cousins were walking home. Hudspeth had a violent criminal history, including bank robberies, sexual assaults, and attempted homicide. He had been a disabled former employee of a fiberglass company in San Jose and had previously been in Arkansas and San Diego. All evidence pointed toward Hudspeth as the suspect. However, when detectives identified him, they discovered he had died in October 1999 at age 48 from a medical condition. He had been deceased for 20 years. To confirm Hudspeth's involvement definitively, Detective Blass and his team needed to obtain a DNA sample from Hudspeth himself. They authored a search warrant to exhume Hudspeth's remains from a cemetery in Santa Clara. The court approved the warrant. With assistance from the Serological Research Institute in Richmond, DNA evidence was successfully extracted from Hudspeth's exhumed remains. The samples were sent to testing to multiple DNA labs, including facilities in San Leandro and Richmond. The DNA testing results came back positive. The DNA extracted from Clifton Hudspeth's remains was a match to the DNA evidence recovered from both crime scenes in 1982. Detective Jacob Blass stated that the suspect's DNA was all over both crime scenes and there was a sole male source. This definitively proved that Clifton Hudspeth had killed Mary Jane Malatag and Jeffrey Flores Atup. Investigators believe that Hudspeth acted alone and was the only suspect in the case. A specific motive for the murders has not been determined. Mary Jane Malatag had been sexually assaulted. In December 2019, nearly 37 years after the murders, Fremont police held a press conference to announce the cold case had been solved. Detective Blass met with the families of Jeffrey Flores Atup and Mary Jane Malatag before the public announcement. The families expressed appreciation for the investigators' efforts, but requested privacy as they processed this long-awaited news. Detectives also notified Clifton Hudspeth's family of the findings. The victims' families released a statement saying they had lost hope over the years of ever knowing who committed these murders. They thanked Detective Blass for never forgetting these 2 innocent children and expressed gratitude to the Fremont Police Department and initial detectives. The family was attempting to rebuild their lives while re-mourning their loss. The identification brought closure, though it could never erase decades of pain. Because Hudspeth died in 1999, he was never arrested, charged, or prosecuted for the murders. There would be no trial and no opportunity for the families to see him held accountable in a courtroom. The only justice available was the knowledge of who was responsible. Detective Blass and other investigators believe that Hudspeth may have been involved in additional crimes beyond the murders of Mary Jane Malatag and Jeffrey Flores Atup. Police specifically noted that Hudspeth was known to be in Arkansas and San Diego in the months before these murders occurred. They issued a public appeal asking anyone with information about other cases where Hudspeth might be involved to contact the Fremont Police Division Cold Case Division. Detective Blass mentioned the possibility of other sexual assault victims coming forward now that Hudspeth's identity and photograph had been released publicly. Whether Hudspeth committed additional crimes remains unknown. The case of Mary Jane Malatag and Jeffrey Flores Atup demonstrates both the limitations of traditional investigative methods and the power of emerging forensic technologies. For 37 years, their families lived without answers. Forensic genetic genealogy provided the tool that finally cracked the case. While Clifton Hudspeth never faced earthly justice for his crimes, his identification ensured that Mary Jane and Jeffrey's murders would not remain forever unsolved mysteries.